Good afternoon, Rotarians and guests. Welcome to the Rotary Club of Toledo. Today we'll present another great program with Dr. Wayne Dornan. First, I'd like to ask past President Chuck Mann to come to the podium to deliver a reflection and have Fadi Sabani lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand.
So Friday night was sleepover night with Grandma and Grandpa, two of our grandchildren, and they spent the night with us, and we divide and conquer. So Barb takes one at bedtime, and I take the other, and we go in, and they do three things. They read a book. The book I read was Miss Moo Goes to the Zoo. They sing a song. My song was I Will, which was written by Paul McCartney and sung by him. It's from the White Album. And then we choose a prayer from this book. And as I'm paging through the book, I ran across this one, which I liked in particular. So let us pray. Laughing is a good feeling that wells up inside of us like water in a fountain until we feel so good that it overflows. Thank you for laughter, God. It's such a fun way to share a good feeling. It's such a fun way to share your love for us. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Chuck and Fadi. As we begin today's meeting, I'd like to thank and acknowledge USI, this month's meeting sponsor. We do not have any visiting Rotarians today, but if anybody has another guest they would like to present to us, would you please go to the floor mic so we can see you and hear you and see your guests. No, we need the mic on.
Is it on now?
Yes.
Okay. I have two guests today, my sister Mary Beth DiMatteo and my partner Cindy Allen.
President Dick and fellow Rotarians, I'd like two of my guests to stand up, please. All of you have met, I think, Manuel Carriega, our exchange student from Mexico who's with us this year. And most of you have not met my wife, Elaine Sheehan, who's with us as well.
Welcome as always. I would like to ask Rick Marshall to come to the floor mic to make an announcement about the Disability Services Committee Imagination Station Service Project.
Thank you, President Dick. The Disability Services Committee hosted students from Glendale Fieldbach School on Friday at the Imagination Station, and we had an absolute blast. If you're not familiar with Glendale Fieldbach, it's a school that serves individuals with intellectual or developmental disabilities. Toledo Rotary was very instrumental in getting that school started many years ago. We've done an event at the zoo in the fall for probably over 20 years with this group, and we really wanted another event that would allow them to come in and engage more and really have some hands-on activities. And we found it in the Imagination Station. So we had a great time on Friday. In addition to the kids from Glendale Fieldbach, students from St. Francis joined us, young men who really help with the activity and engage with the students. So we had a great time. When it comes around this fall, we'll probably do another event at the zoo, and would invite everybody to volunteer for that. It's inspiring. It's inspiring to interact with these kids. It's also inspiring to see the young men from St. Francis and how mature they are and how well they work with the kids from Glendale Fieldbach. So thanks to all on the Disability Services Committee who helped make this happen. And we're having a meeting actually today of the committee at 1 o'clock where we'll be reviewing some grant proposals. So if you're interested in disability services, if you want to drop in on the committee, you're welcome to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Thanks to all who participated. It was a great time. I'd like to ask Pat Sheehan to come back to the podium now to share his insight and experience with the Rotary Youth Exchange Program.
Good afternoon. Have you ever prepared comments for a Rotary presentation or other presentation and you wake up the morning of and realize you got to tear it up and start all over again? That happened to me today, and I'm going to blame this on Manuel. Actually, I should give him credit for this, but anyway, Manuel made a comment to me in the kitchen last night that kind of changed my course on this. I'm going to go back to 8 months ago, last August. I'll never forget the day. It was a Monday. Manuel was traveling to the U.S., and Elaine and I drove up to Detroit to pick him up at the airport. And Manuel had a long day, but anyway, we had dinner, got home. Tuesday morning, we wake up, and we were on a fast track. We had to get to St. Francis, go through an orientation, get Manuel signed up for classes. I think classes were starting maybe that Friday. It was very soon. And got to St. Francis, and Joe Sweeney, who's been incredibly gracious and accommodating to us throughout this whole experience, gave us a tour, lined us up with counselors, et cetera. And so we got through that, and then Joe took us out to lunch. We went to, what's the Mediterranean place on? Ferdo's. Went to Ferdo's on Bancroft, and throughout lunch, Joe was giving Manuel and us, we were new as well, kind of an orientation of what St. Francis was all about. And we're just kind of, drinking out of a fire hose, learning all this stuff about St. Francis. And I'll never forget, at the end of lunch, Joe said to Manuel, do you have any questions or concerns I can answer? And Manuel said something like, I have no questions, but I do have a concern. And Joe said, well, what's that? And Manuel said, discrimination. And that kind of stopped Joe dead in his tracks, and Elaine and I were a bit taken aback too. And Manuel said, being from Mexico, I'm concerned about discrimination. And Joe quickly, I think, doused Manuel's concerns and said, Manuel, our St. Francis community is very welcoming. You're not going to see any of that here or in Toledo. You're going to be fine. And Manuel, I think, felt a lot better about that. And later on, we learned a little bit more what the roots of his concern were about. But it was neat at that point at lunch. Elaine said, Manuel, your mission while you're here this year is if you ever run into anybody that might have prejudice feelings toward Mexico, when they get to know you and love you, you're going to change their hearts. That's your mission while you're here. And it wasn't until then that I realized I thought this trip here was all about Manuel. He was going to, become proficient in our language. He was going to get integrated into our community. He was going to have a good school year at St. Francis. And that's what the exchange experience was all about. And I didn't realize till then that maybe I had it all backwards. And that the biggest gift of Manuel coming is not what he's going to go home with, but with what he leaves us. And this young man has had the power to impact not just us, but all of the kids in the St. Francis community and others that he's got introduced to. And it's a neat thing to realize what Manuel has been able to do. So back to the conversation in our kitchen last night. Manuel had just finished a weekend out in Archbold. He was with District 6600 exchange students as well as some other high school students from the area that were there for a 3-day weekend. And Manuel met one young man in particular who was from a area high school. I don't know if he's Fulton Williams County maybe. And at the end of the day, he said to Manuel, I'm so glad I got to meet you. And Manuel said, well, glad I got to meet you too. And the young man said to Manuel, I wish my father could meet you. My father does not like Mexicans. In fact, my father won't even take me to a Mexican restaurant. Manuel, if he met you, you would change his heart. And I so wish he could meet you someday. And I thought last night, my gosh, there it is, the power of a young man coming into our country and the impact that he can have on us. So, our next Manuel is about to come. His name is Pedro. Pedro is from Brazil, and we need a host family or maybe a tag team of host families to take Pedro on in this coming school year. And I have little doubt that Pedro, in his way, can have the same impact on our community that Manuel has had. So, and it's funny, Manuel and Pedro have actually gotten in touch in the last week or two. Somebody from Rotary gave Pedro Manuel's contact information. And so Manuel came down last week and they had this little exchange and Manuel, what do you guys not do? What do you guys call each other? Bro. So, okay, I'm on the spectrum of cool and uncool parents. I'm on the uncool side. So, anyway, Pedro says to Manuel, "Hey, bro, is it true that we have to wear ties every day at school?" And Manuel said, "Sorry, bro, you got to wear that tie every day." And Pedro said, "Hey, bro, is it true that there aren't any girls at St. Francis?" And Manuel said, "Sorry, bro. Yeah, it's true." But I'm sure Manuel gave Pedro a great send-off. He's excited about coming to St. Francis. And he'll be here in August, and we need to be ready for him. So just a couple comments about being a host family. Elaine and I have had Manuel in our home since last August. And, you know, taking on a teenage boy into your house is no small thing. Elaine and I have 4 kids of our own. They're actually all grown and out of the house now. So we kind of knew what we were getting into. But you take on a teenage boy, it can be a big job. Now, I will say that Manuel has been a piece of cake. He really has. He's so easy to get along with, but, you know, the logistics of having a teenager in your house is a big deal. And I want to publicly thank Elaine again and recognize her because she has been like the VP of logistics at our house. She's always been that way. But, yeah. But Manuel and I have learned to, wherever Elaine tells us where to go or when to go there, we just do it, and things tend to work out. But what I want to tell you about the thing as a host parent with St. Francis, and that's where Pedro is going to go, is you are not alone in parenting this child. The St. Francis community, starting with Joe Sweeney and Father O and many, many families, has been incredibly helpful to us. We could not have done this by ourselves. So some of the families, the Finns, the Walkers, the DeSales, these families have taken Manuel into their home, some overnight stays. They've done meals with him. They've taken him out of town to water polo matches, to lacrosse matches, and they've been incredibly helpful to us. And I know if you take Pedro on as a parent, you're going to have plenty of help from that community as well. So that's the good side. And, you know, of all the inconveniences of being a parent, and those of you that are parents know them well, the value that we have found in being parents of Manuel for this past year are wonderful. We have just been honored and blessed to be his parents this last year, and we are incredibly proud of how he has, yes, taken on the English language, complete with all the slang words, and really integrated himself into school and the community. It's been a total pleasure on our part. The other thing, and I'll maybe say this a little bit tongue-in-cheek, is a warning if you do this, is you're setting yourselves up for heartbreak. I don't know how else to put it, but Elaine and I have been host parents for several children over the years, most of them from Africa, but they've all had different medical conditions. And our job has been to house them, feed them, love them, and get them to their doctor's appointments, and then send them back to home all better. And they don't have their mother and father with them. They just come here by themselves. And I'll never forget, I think maybe the third child we had, his name was Stevie. And when we had to send Stevie back, I cried like a baby. It was not pretty. And if I didn't say it to Elaine, I said it to myself, why do we put ourselves through this? This is not good. But then after a while, you'd get over it and realize, all right, Stevie is back home, he's doing better, it's all been worth it. And I realized in these last few weeks that we've set ourselves up for heartache again. Manuel's going to be going back in a couple months, but just like with those host children, just like with being a parent, the wonderful things that have come out of this far outweigh that heartbreak. And the bonus we know with Manuel, and I'm sure with Pedro the same way, is we know we're going to see Manuel again. We're going to be going to Mexico in the not too distant future to visit Manuel, to see his family. And that's going to be a lifelong connection we'll have with him, which is really special. Manuel, we hope we're invited to your wedding someday. If we are, we'll be there. And take your time on that one, but someday we hope to be there. Yeah. Anyway, so that's a little bit about being a host family. We need some families to step up this coming year for Pedro. I encourage you to think about that. If it's not right for you, a friend, somebody in the Toledo area that can take Pedro on, I promise you, whether it's you or another family, it'll be a memory of a lifetime for you, and you'll be very, very pleased that you got engaged in this program. So thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Thank you, Elaine, for stepping up and taking care of Manuel. And Manuel, we look forward to your speech to the club in the first week of June. Manuel will be addressing us at that time. If you haven't done so already, please check into social media, let folks know you're here at our club today, and then I ask that you silence your phones for the rest of today's meeting. Right before the meeting, Greg Fess, Rotarian Greg Fess, presented me with this flag from the Rotary Club of Corozal Town, Belize. Greg was down there on a Rotary trip, equipping 21 schools with computers and books and other educational items. So, Greg, thanks for the good work, and thanks for bringing us another flag. Hopefully, you saw the great press coverage we got last week. We had our press conference on transformational projects at the Middle Grounds Metro Park last Thursday. It was a rather blustery day, but we managed to get through. We had the mayor, Wade Kapsakevich, there to address the group, Toledo Rotarian Romulus Durant, Superintendent of Toledo Public Schools also. It was a great press conference. We got great coverage in the media and in the Blade. Kathy and I had the pleasure of doing the Leading Edge show with Jerry Anderson, and that was on Saturday and Sunday. And I don't know if you saw it, but on Saturday in the Blade, in the religion section, great story on the 100th anniversary of Easter seals. And you'll see on the screen there, featured the history of Toledo with Alva Bunker and what this club has done for people with disabilities, and how much our club and other Rotary clubs in our area contributed to the Easter Seals movement, which, as you know, is a national movement that's done a lot of great things for the people in the disabled community. So if you haven't seen it, check that out. I would like to now mention our Black Tie Affair coming up on June 15. I want to acknowledge the Black Tie sponsors that will be up on the screen. And they're right there. Our primary sponsors are presenting sponsors, Emosteria and ID. You see our major sponsors up there, Markey, Spengler-Nathanson, Thread, Lamar, Two Scale, and Cumulus, and our supporting sponsor, Commerce Paper Company. We'd like to thank those folks for helping putting this together, underwriting the event. You'll be seeing a lot more about that event coming up soon, and we hope you're talking it up, and we'll hope to see you all there. At this time, I'd like to invite Rotarian Zach Isaac to the podium to introduce new member Maria Ranker.
President Dick, before I get started, I just want to share a short story why Maria Rankin is here today. And Brett and I have sung this song so many times with you all, but it was just a casual meeting Maria and I had at a December holiday party. Started kibitzing with each other. Next thing we knew, we were going out to lunch together. She's in the insurance business, I'm in the banking business, see what we had in common. And at lunch, I discovered that she was a member of the Fremont Rotary. Short story from that point on, she's here today because of that. It was just a follow-up. So I guess Brent and I cannot keep pushing, but if we can follow up with our guest, we'll be the 5th largest Rotary club in the world, not the 8th. Anyways, today I'm very pleased to introduce Maria Rankin, who is employed at Brown & Brown Insurance as a personal lines insurance advisor. Maria currently holds not only her property and casualty insurance license, but also her life, health, and annuity license. At Brown & Brown, she focuses on an array of insurance solutions individualized for every client. Each client will be reviewed and receives a personal comprehensive risk management strategy, and I know she's done that for several of her bank clients very successfully. Before Brown & Brown, Maria had a 14-year experience as an associate agent with Nationwide Insurance. In her time at this agency, she and her former husband earned many awards, including the Champions Award, President's Club, along with various other awards. Between her time with Nationwide and Brown & Brown, Maria had 9 years' experience with O.E. Meyer, where she worked in the medical supply and equipment business, assisting many local hospitals with their needs. Maria is also a board-certified respiratory therapist. Outside of Brown & Brown, Maria is heavily involved in giving back to her community. Specifically, she is involved with the Fremont Federal Credit Union as a board member, the ProMedica Toledo Children's Hospital Board. She's heavily involved in St. Joseph's Parish as a lector, communion distributor, and served on the parish council. Additionally, she has, as I said before, has been involved with Fremont Rotary Club for several years and served as president of the Clyde Business and Professionals. In her free time, Maria enjoys outdoor activities such as walking, golfing, sailing, just to mention a few. Any evening or weekend, you can find her with her friends, exploring her community and attending many local events. This time, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Maria Rankin as the newest member of Rotary.
And now I'd like to ask Rotarian Neil Newcomb to come to the podium to introduce new member Dylan Orwig.
Thank you, President Dick. Good afternoon, everyone. Hi, Kathy. Yeah. Dylan Orwig, he joined the Lathrop Company in 2014 as a field engineer and currently holds a position of business development for the organization. During his tenure, he has held numerous positions in the field such as engineer, site safety manager, cost analyst, and SPD project manager. He graduated magna cum laude from the University of Toledo with a Bachelor of Science in Construction Engineering Technology. Dylan is involved in boards at the United Way of Greater Toledo Emerging Leaders, the Wood County Economic Development, Toledo Chamber of Commerce, Epic Toledo, and he's also president of the Construction Leadership Council, a subcommittee of the Associated General Contractors of Northwest Ohio. And he volunteers his time with several nonprofit community-based organizations throughout the region. Dylan resides in Toledo with his wife Kate and 2 children, Claire and Jameson. Fellow Rotarians, Manuel, please join me in a warm welcome my bro, Dylan Orwig, as the latest member of Toledo Rotary. Thank you.
Now I'd like to ask Rotarian Mary Westfall to come to the podium to introduce today's speaker.
Thank you, President Dick. Good afternoon, fellow Rotarians and guests. I am Mary Westfall, Executive Director for Susan G. Komen, Northwest Ohio. And before I begin my introduction, I'd like to take a quick moment to recognize some partners who have joined us here today. We have our friends here from Medical Mutual, Frank Bloomquist and Mark Tuman, who helped to underwrite the cost of Dr. Dornan's visit, as well as my colleague from Komen, Northwest Ohio, Gretchen Awad, joining us. Thank you so much for being here today. Today it is my pleasure and honor to introduce our guest speaker, Dr. Wayne Dornan. I am sure that everyone in this room realizes that breast cancer is primarily a women's disease. And today you will hear about breast cancer from a different perspective. Dr. Dornan is a male breast cancer survivor who is an advocate for everyone touched by breast cancer, men and women. And his story is definitely not the story that we are used to hearing. Dr. Dornan joins us today with nearly 40 years of experience in academia. After receiving his undergraduate degree in psychology from Concordia University, Dr. Dornan completed his master's in science and his PhD in experimental psychology with a focus on clinical neuroscience at Memorial University. He went on to complete his postdoctoral degree in reproductive neuroendocrinology from UCLA School of Medicine. Dr. Dornan is co-founder of the Central Illinois Neuroscience Foundation. He served as professor and chair of Middle Tennessee State University and academic dean of Utah Valley University before his retirement in 2015. Currently, Dr. Dornan is working with cancer associations both nationally and regionally as a patient and research advocate. Dr. Dornan joined Susan G. Komen at the national level as a member of Komen's Advocates in Science in 2015 and its steering committee in 2018. Additionally, he was recognized as a Komen Scholar in 2018. He also chairs Komen's Committee on Advocates in peer review. A published author, he is a strong voice for male breast cancer advocacy and awareness. Dr. Dornan published a book about his journey in 2016 that launched his platform for delivering public presentations and media interviews on issues of breast cancer treatment, diagnosis, and breast cancer awareness and research for both men and women. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Wayne Dornan.
Thank you very much for that introduction, and I would like to thank the Toledo Rotary Club as well as Medical Mutual and the local Komen affiliate for helping me come out here today to talk to you about something that I think is a very, very important topic. I think that one of the things that I can say unequivocally is I travel the country, and I also, being representative of the Komen Affiliate Steering Committee, I meet hundreds of people from local affiliates across the United States almost every other week or certainly every month. And I am not saying this with any exaggeration at all, but the group of people that I've met here who are working for your local Komen affiliate are on point and are absolutely passionate and dedicated to fight this horrible, horrible disease. So it's a pleasure when I meet people who share the passion for this disease as much as I do. On a more personal level, I would like to shed light today on something that is more than dear to my heart, but to tell you and show you with my presentation that breast cancer is absolutely more than pink. I was diagnosed about 10 years ago, and although men pale in comparison to the female statistics, thousands of men each year are diagnosed with breast cancer. And unfortunately, hundreds die every year from this horrible disease. That's the bad news. The good news is I review grants for the federal government, as well as I co-chair the grant committee for Susan G. Komen National, which is the second biggest grantor of breast cancer grants in the world, apart from the federal government. And I can say this from the bottom of my heart that I am absolutely convinced that within the next decade, decade and a half, we are going to see a cure for this horrible, horrible disease. Because I see every day and I talk to and read about these grants every single day. And we have people working on this they live and sleep this stuff. So one day my dream, like Susan G. Komen and certainly Nancy Brinker, who was Susan G. Komen's sister, is to one day have my great-granddaughter walk up to me and say, "Grandpa," and I would, "Yeah, what did they mean by breast cancer?" That's my dream. All right. Oh, I got to turn it on. Now, just a few basic facts about breast cancer. One of the, there are a variety of different breast cancers, but if you can see from this slide here, this slide shows you a duct. Now, one of the things that I go around when I talk about breast cancer to men and women is, although we don't have the volume, the mass, breasts in men and women are almost identical. We have all the same anatomy. And so men have ducts in their breasts, and of course women do as well. And when you have cells that start developing, breast cancer cells start developing inside the wall and then progress and escape the membrane, that is what is called invasive ductal carcinoma, and that is the worst breast cancer diagnosis that you can get. However, 83% and 92%, more men than women, are diagnosed with this disease every year. So a little bit of statistics. About 268,000 women will be diagnosed with breast cancer this year. That's data from the National Cancer Society. And approximately 2,600 men will be diagnosed with invasive ductal carcinoma. In Ohio, give you a perspective, in Tennessee, we'll see about 7,000 cases estimated in Tennessee this year. So in Ohio, it's over 10,000 cases will be diagnosed. And what that translates into is that today, 29 people in this state will be diagnosed with breast cancer. One of the most common symptoms in both men and women, and particularly in men, is a lump felt on your breast. And I'm going to talk about that in a few seconds, about how that happened to me. In fact, I'm going to talk about it right now. So let me give you a little bit of background. As I've told many people since I've been here, I am what is called a raging hypochondriac. I inherited that very proudly from my mother. So unlike most men, when I was in the shower on Friday morning in 2008, I felt a lump on my breast. And I immediately went to my doctor. And I've done a lot of clinical trials on stroke and Alzheimer's, so a lot of the people in the academic medical community know of my research. And so often to break the ice, we talk about that. And we talked about it with my general doctor, how's things going right now with Alzheimer's research, and so on and so forth. And then he turned around to me with a big smile and said, "Okay, let me see, big guy." And he had a big smile on his face, and when I opened up my shirt, just by looking at the expression on his face, I knew that there was something really wrong with me. That afternoon, I went and I had an ultrasound, which came back as a suspicious mass. And then I was set up with a surgeon on Monday morning to have a biopsy. Did the biopsy, and he told me, he said, "Look, Wayne, I always call my patients back in. So if you get a call in a couple of days to come and see me, don't hit the panic button. That's how I work. I never tell anybody that a diagnosis on the phone." And so that's where I'm going to pick up right now. "Wayne, you know I can't tell you the results over the phone. I will be in my office briefly tomorrow morning, and you can stop by then." My surgeon was on the phone. It was Tuesday, May 6, 2008, around 3:30 p.m., and I had been counting every second since early yesterday afternoon. "Dr. Allen, I understand what you told me yesterday, but I didn't sleep last night, and I have already called your office 4 times today. Your nurse told me that they had received the biopsy report. I had been obsessed with negative thoughts since my biopsy on Monday, and the thought of waiting until Wednesday morning to find out the news was, to me, unbearable. Are you okay? Are you in a private place? And are you sure you want to hear the results on the phone? He said. Yes, I'm fine. You can tell me on the phone. My surgeon replied, okay, the results of your biopsy are unequivocal. You have invasive ductal carcinoma. At first, I was at a loss for words, and after several uncomfortable minutes, I finally said, so what's the next step? My surgeon said that the most common treatment for male breast cancer is surgical removal of the mass, and the standard procedure is a mastectomy. After a slight pause, he said that we needed to remove the mass as soon as possible and that he was in surgery all day tomorrow, but if I wanted, he can squeeze me in. Although I knew I should take some time to think about my treatment options, I wanted this thing out of me immediately. After about 30 minutes later, my surgeon called. Do you realize that tomorrow is your birthday, he said. I said, absolutely, and I am counting on you to give me the best birthday present ever. Invasive ductal carcinoma. Although at that time I didn't have a complete understanding of what exactly that meant, I knew it was breast cancer, and I knew it wasn't good. I got up from my desk and walked out of my office. My secretary, who was a breast cancer survivor herself, knew it was my surgeon on the phone, and as I walked by her desk, she looked up from me from what she was working on and had a very concerned look on her face. As I left my office, she said, "Is everything all right, Dr. Dornan?" To which I replied, "Not really. I'll explain later." Over the next 15 minutes, I just walked aimlessly through the university campus, the diagnosis of invasive ductal carcinoma echoing through my mind. I felt numb, frightened, and very confused. For the first time in my life, I thought about the possibility that I might die. Moreover, I was a male. That was the weird part. I had a variety of thoughts racing through my mind. I didn't even realize that men could get breast cancer or why this had to happen to me. If I had cancer, why couldn't it have been a male form of cancer? Although I realized that this was a crazy thought, I felt slightly embarrassed about my diagnosis. How was I going to break the news to my family and friends? In my wildest dreams, I could never imagine me having breast cancer. That was approximately 10 and a half years ago, and it took years for me to get over the initial embarrassment of having breast cancer. But I remember the first time that I walked into the chemo suite, and I saw all of the people that were ready to get injected that day. And I looked around the room, and I could tell within seconds, by the posture, by the talk, by the body language, that there were a lot of people in there that had basically given up. And unfortunately, that's the worst thing that you can do with this disease. So it was then and there, in that chemo room, that I decided that I wasn't going to be embarrassed about this disease anymore. And you know what? I was not going to let it define who I was. And I was going to fight like crazy to spread the word around to men and women about this disease. I remember walking in and seeing my oncologist for the very first time. We sat down, we went over the pathology report, which is so incredibly important because it dictates your disease treatment approach. And he said, "You know, Wayne, I'm a principal investigator on a clinical trial, and you satisfy every single clinical criteria, and I'm going to get you in this trial. I want you to come back tomorrow. I'm going to talk with my co-principal investigator tonight, and we're going to sign you up, and we're going to go from there." And I walked out of his office. It was about 6 weeks now because I had to recover first from my surgery before they did chemo. And I remember standing in the elevator thinking for the very first time, okay, I can see the light at the end of this tunnel. Positive things are going to happen with this. I went to see him the next day and got into his office, sat down, and he looked at me and he said, I've got good news and I've got bad news. Being the way I am, I said, okay, what's the bad news? He said, although, as I told you yesterday, you satisfy every single clinical criteria to get into this trial, and I am one of the co-principal investigators, you have been disqualified. Who's going to yell out why? You all know why. Because I was a man. And I put that in the back of my head, like a lot of other things I was putting it back, because being an academic and being medically trained, I knew that ultimately I was going to write a book. And as the years progressed, when I saw, we talk about discrimination, and I saw how we were not getting the attention that we deserved as men with breast cancer, I was absolutely convinced that when I wrote my book, I was going to address a lot of these issues, and I was going to lobby for it, which I do every year in D.C. I said, what's the good news? Well, I have this philosophy, and I know I'm not the only one, that I believe in life everything happens for a reason. God closes a door only to open up another door, and you don't necessarily understand at the time, but everything happens for a reason. Because I asked him, so what are we going to do now? He said, we're going to do it, me and you. We're going to do it. I'm so convinced that this is the way to go with breast cancer treatment. You and I are going to do it. And here I am, 10 and a half years later. I'm still here. Has that issue gone away? No. I was here, on Friday, when I received an email from Komen Corporate, and they wanted to make sure that I was okay, that there was a gentleman who was just diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer. It's very rare that you get a metastatic event in a year after diagnosis, but it does occur. So this poor individual was diagnosed with male breast cancer, and a year later he was diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer, and he wanted to know, that Komen wanted to know if they could give out my information so he could contact me. I contacted him and we discussed something, and here's what he said. Hello, my name is so-and-so, and I am a 43-year-old man from D.C. who was recently diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer. I received your name at Komen. I met with her last week, and I'm trying to find a way to help direct more funding to male breast cancer research. I have lost my mind over the last year listening to my doctors say that there is nothing that they can do because there is no research on men with breast cancer. So I just keep taking the woman's medicine, but this feels to me to fall short. I was wondering if there's any way that you can help me with this situation. So here we are, 10 and a half years later, and we are still facing the same situation. Absolutely, there should be more efforts with women. There's 268,000 compared to less than 3,000. But we need, and that's one of the things I do, is to go and try and encourage these brilliant young minds to, do your research project, but let's introduce a little bit of a male arm, we call it, experiment to look at men again. Why is this thing? Okay, I got it. Here we go. Sorry. All right. So, what's the take-home quick message for you guys? Cancer has no boundaries. We know that. Cancer has no boundaries. It takes women. It takes men. It takes grandfathers. It takes grandmothers, aunts and uncles, and it even has the audacity to take young children. Breast cancer, there's a lot of things that we don't know about breast cancer, but there's one thing that we know, and that is early diagnosis means you have an excellent chance to survive. An early diagnosis means you have to have breast cancer screening as soon as you possibly can. And if you're a male and you're over 40 and you have a history of breast cancer in your family, you're at high risk. So you need to do screenings as well. And for men, it's very quick to do a self-examination. But you need to do it now because you need to familiarize yourself with your breasts, so that way if something is going wrong, you know immediately that there's something wrong. Also, treatment for breast cancer has changed dramatically. Since I was diagnosed, it's changed dramatically in the last 5 years. And if caught early, it's no longer a death sentence. And we have ingenious new treatments that are coming out now, very specialized treatments. We don't do the garden hose approach anymore to breast cancer. We have what is called targeted therapy, which targets specific proteins. And we also then, because we know each individual, although we share common genes, express these genes differently. So what's good for John is not necessarily good for Bill. So then we take the targeted therapy and then we personalize it. Way, way better than what we were doing even 5 years ago. So how can you help? We are absolutely close. But the closer we get, that's not a time to become passive. We need to rally the troops to say we need to go out and encourage people to get into this field and devote the rest of their life to this cause. But it's hard now because when you go into academia, your whole life revolves around getting tenure. And to get tenure in academia, you need to get huge research grants. And not just huge ones, you need to get them. And then the sad thing about it, because it's hard to get grants, some of these brilliant minds, instead of getting into research, are now going somewhere else. So we need to encourage, not only at local levels, but at federal levels, to keep this fight going, because I'm sure one day we will see a cure, but we have to, like this pink and blue ribbon with the boxing gloves, it's a fight every single day. So God bless you all, and thank you very much. And I'll take questions if any of you have some.
Interesting story.
Thank
I
you.
have a brother-in-law who lost his mother to breast cancer, lost his sister to breast cancer before she turned 30, has another sister who's had 2 bouts of breast cancer under the age of 50, and he now has been diagnosed. He was tested for the BRCA gene, and he too has tested positive for the BRCA gene. So my understanding is that he is at a higher risk for breast, pancreatic, and prostate cancer. What is the role that a geneticist plays in helping map out what the likelihood is of incidence within a family who carries a BRCA gene so predominantly?
Well, that's an excellent question, because one of the things is that when you decide, particularly if you've had a family member diagnosed with breast cancer, I think it's critically important that you go and you get some genetic testing. But you need to have a whole consulting team that talks to you post-genetic tests, because they're very hard to understand. And just because, for example, you have the BRCA gene does not necessarily mean that you will get cancer, but it's a high likelihood you will. One of the things that they're doing now is, in addition to the BRCA gene, they're also testing for other proteins that I was talking about. So if you have some of these proteins that come out on a genetic test that some of your genes are producing these specific proteins, then they can then gear the therapy. And not only can they gear the therapy towards that specific protein, but it will tell them a couple of things. 1, do you need chemotherapy? 2, if you need chemotherapy, what type do you need? So it's sad. One of the things that he has to do now, he has a very high risk. So he's got to go one step beyond the self-examination, and he's got to have ultrasounds done. How old is he? 59. So he's probably got to have an ultrasound of his breast annually until he's about 65, 70. But that's an excellent question. We need to do it, but you can't just go and do it all by yourself and make your own decisions. Yes, sir.
If it went over my head, my apologies, but what are the specific 5 words that changed your life?
You have invasive ductal carcinoma. Yeah.
Thank you.
Something you don't want to ever hear. Thank you. That's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Wayne. Thank you. Wayne, thank you very much for today's great program. To show our appreciation, the Toledo Rotary Club Foundation will make a donation in your name to the Rotary International Polio Plus Fund. And we also have this book about historical tales of Toledo for you to take home. Yes. With Easter coming this Sunday, we will not have a meeting next Monday. Please join us in 2 weeks, Monday, April 29th, when our speaker will be Julie Rubini, Claire's Day founder, speaking on moving forward through life one day at a time. Maria and Dylan, welcome again to Toledo Rotary. And Zach and Neil, thank you for introducing our new members today. Following today's program, the Disability Services Committee will be meeting in the Presque Isle Room, and the new member committee will be meeting in the North Cape Room. And he's up center stage, so past President Chuck Mann.
Before I do this, Rotary is having a talent search. We are looking for actors and actresses that would help us out at the Black Tie Affair, either behind the scenes or actors and actresses in front of the scenes, in front of the stage, on the stage, or in front of a camera. So show business background is helpful, but is not necessary. There would be at least 3 rehearsals. We're still writing, so they won't be starting. I would feel certain they probably won't start yet this month, but they'll be coming up. So if you have interest in helping us out, see past President Sharon Skilleter or the Rotary office to sign up. There's 2. Remember what day it is today. A man was driving along the road when all of a sudden he had to swerve to avoid a box falling off the truck ahead. Seconds later, a policeman pulled him over for reckless driving, and as the policeman started writing the ticket, he noticed the box was full of nails and tacks. I had to swerve, or I'd have run over those and blown my tires, protested the driver. Okay, replied the officer, but I'm still going to have to write you up. What for? Retorted the man. Anyone want to take a shot at this? Tax evasion. Very good. A little boy wanted $100 for a new bike and prayed for 2 weeks, but nothing happened. Then he decided to write a letter to the Lord requesting the $100. When the postal authorities received the letter addressed to the Lord, USA, they decided to send it to the president, who was so impressed, touched, and amused that he instructed his secretary to send the little boy a $5 bill, as this would appear to be a lot of money to a little boy. The little boy was delighted with the $5 and sat down to write a thank you note to the Lord. It said, "Dear Lord, thank you very much for sending me the money. However, I noticed that for some reason you had to send it through Washington, D.C., and as usual, those jerks deducted $95.
Thank you, Chuck. Happy Tax Day to everybody. Remember, let's continue to be servants out there so we can be the inspiration. We are adjourned.